I'm so glad to see all you here. Thank you so much for coming. It's really great. I'm Michelle Jensen, started the Parent Resource Center in 2004 with a vision of creating healthier communities, and because I think one way to do that is through parenting. So, brain development. How do we build our child's character? Most amazing statistic is that 90% of a child's brain development happens before age 5. She's nodding. I know you know, and it's a lot of you know that, some of you don't, but imagine that, and only 10% after that. So we have to get kind of, what are we going to instill in our kids? So John Bowlby, he wrote the attachment theory, and he's the founder of that theory. And he was a British psychologist, psychiatrist, and psychoanalyst, and he pioneered this work in attachment. And we've all seen, he was really influenced by that imprinting with the duck, and we've all seen those little pictures sometimes where there's a duck and it wakes up, and then a cat walks by and it thinks that's mommy, and he starts walking with the cat and everything. Well, this little dog found him apparently, but Bowlby's theory of attachment suggests that children come into the world already pre-programmed and hardwired to attach to somebody, to a caregiver, to somebody. Because when they do that, they're going to survive. It's a biological thing. They're just going to survive. So that was an important discovery. He did a famous study in 1973, and that study had 20 kids in it, and they all received dolls that they were labeled mommy and daddy dolls. And these kids were between 13 and 22 months. 10 of the kids stayed home, and the other 10 went to an institutional nursery for like 2 weeks. And boy, 8 out of 10 of the ones at the nursery attacked their dolls within a few days. They were very, very angry that their caregiver was not there.
My parenting work has been with DHS, Family Services, over the years. 1992, I was hired to do a job in what they called parent training. In the process of doing that program, I found out that for me, my feelings had been pretty well covered up or hidden. How did I know that? Here's some experiences. I remember a little boy climbing up the front steps. I wasn't very competent as a crawler or climber at the time. And so as I was clambering my way up the stairs, I managed to gather a long sliver under one of my fingernails. And I remember sitting on there just bent, I'm in this posture, and I'm looking down, and the sliver is sticking out of my finger, and it's bleeding a little bit. And Herbert Bones, my father, comes up behind me and puts his arm over my back and says, "Good boy, and you didn't even cry." So at 3 years old, I learned I shouldn't have feelings. Well, that's how I interpreted it. I think Dad meant when you have a sliver, it's okay to live with that. But I interpreted that to mean don't have feelings.
I want to say we're going to be talking about male brains here. And as I mentioned earlier during one of the breaks, the truth is we do have some, although sometimes people misdiagnose that. And I think the reason that this is important is because, how many of you have male children, for instance? Right? And any of you have brothers? Right? Fathers? Male partners? You're going to want to really listen. This is going to be helpful. And then some of you actually are still boys yourself. We know that because, right, here we go. So I think we got that. I really believe when you're talking about gender, as we're going to look at it today, a male-female, and I'm recognizing in this that gender comes across the whole spectrum. So, when we're talking about male-female, we're talking about brain differences and how the brains are formed and how they function. That's different than our gender orientation, which has, like at the PSU right now, we have 9 different categories of gender orientation that you can check on the student list, for instance. So don't get those two confused. But if we talk about brain differences, males and females, I don't think you can ever have an expert. You can only be a half-spert. because women can tell us what it's like in your head, and we can try and tell you what it's like in our head, and then we can try and figure that out together. But if I start talking like I know what's happening for a female, then you know that I'm going to get in real trouble and I'm off base. So just be clear about that. So I'm not an expert, but I've had a lot of experience of other people, and that's what I'm going to be drawing on today, is really what they have taught me over the years, kids and adults both. My day job is that I'm executive director for one of the largest adolescent and young adult service agencies for high-risk teenagers in Oregon today. My agency up in Portland, but we have 44 different programs. We're on 20 different locations, and we work with an average of about 6,000 kids every year. And the truth is, the vast majority of those are young men. And the truth is, none of them should ever have needed to be with us if their parents knew what they were doing. So I'm a believer in what Michelle's doing and what the Parent Resource Center is doing.
The hardest part, I think, today for me to be here was listening to everybody else's stuff. I kept getting so engrossed what other people were saying that I'd be like, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot, I'm going to talk about something too. But the big question really of whether or not technology is good for kids, which is a really big question that's kind of broad. So when we say technology, I'm not talking about whether or not we should weaponize a Roomba and use it as a babysitter, or whether or not we should have strollers with USB ports on them. Right, we're really just talking very, very specifically about tablets and iPhones.